Reports.
Chair,
Mr. Benner.
just the 880 program had a webinar last Tuesday on senior housing, which was very informative. And I thought in 2 weeks on the 10th coming up, they'll have a webinar on the last child in the street. So just
Which child?
so I just thought it might be interesting if people are interested.
Was that again that 880?
880.
Okay.
It's a planning website.
Oh. Very good. Thank you.
International planning website, actually.
Okay. Any other announcements from the commission? Okay, consent calendar. We will now proceed with the consent calendar. And at this time, I will entertain a motion to approve the consent calendar as presented.
No moved.
Second.
Been moved and seconded. All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Okay, motion passes and the consent calendar is approved. Next, we have matters from the public and general public comments. We'll proceed with matters from the public. If you would like to speak on a topic pertinent to city business that is not included on the agenda, now is your opportunity to do so. If you wish to speak and haven't yet completed a sign-up form, please do so and hand it to staff. The forms are located on the table by the front doors. If you're attending remotely and wish to speak on a matter that is not on the agenda, please raise your hand on Zoom at this time. I would like to make everyone aware that the city does have a policy on public meeting decorum. The rules are posted on the wall just outside outside the chamber entrance doors. In summary, I would ask that everyone please be pleasant and respectful, not make derogatory comments about or derogatory statements about others, including city staff, not be disorderly or disruptive, no calling out, clapping, or holding up signs, etc. Please note that the commission cannot take testimony on any specific planning or land use related matter or application outside of a official public hearing. As there are as there are public hearings on the agenda this evening, please hold testimony on those matters until after the hearing is over.
Mr. Dunkel, that's incorrect. There's no public hearings on the agenda. Sorry.
Okay, noted and corrected. No public hearing this evening. So general comments are open to just about anything, I guess. Maybe I should. Okay, please no questions or debate with commission. You may contact the mayor or staff during general business hours if you have questions or concerns. When it is your turn to speak, please state your name and whether you reside in city limits. Each speaker will have up to 3 minutes. Madam Clerk, do we have anyone signed up to speak during the general comment period?
We don't currently have anyone signed up to speak.
Okay, anybody raise their hand on Zoom?
No.
Okay. That will conclude the general public comment portion of the meeting. And we have no public hearing. We have no old business. So we'll move on to new business. Next is a discussion on the draft commercial zoning and new historic preservation code. I will yield the floor to Deputy Director of Community Planning and Development, Bill Dean.
Good evening, Chair. Commissioners, it's nice to be with you this evening. Thanks so much for taking time out. Quite a large packet you have. Lots to go over. I'll just say it up front. This is something you'll probably be seeing the exact same materials in your packet for a while. I think we've got to spend some time on this. So I want to just get that out of the way. This is not something we're going to ask you to look at in 2 weeks at a public hearing, for example. I want to spend some time with you on this. I want to go through it. I want to make sure everybody understands it. And just a couple ground rules. This is something that I think goes almost without saying, but I'm going to say it anyway. So I think it's really important for us to get into practice, especially something as big as these new ordinances, is when you have an idea that you want to express or a concern, I'm going to appreciate it if you were to say, instead of Bill, what are you thinking? Don't you like real estate agents or something like that? Rather you say, why would we as a city decide to do this? Or why would we as a city want to evaluate this? Why? Because you are the city. And so we're talking about creating some significant new rules for the city. So I think it's really important to be mindful that your questions are going to be for each other mainly. Why would we as a body making a recommendation to council want to do X, Y, or Z? Now, if you have a question for me, like, hey, Bill, can you help us understand the thinking behind this particular aspect, or can you help us clarify this, or what led you to make this particular proposal? That's great, but in the end, it's going to be about why would you as a body decide to recommend or not something to council? Does that make some sense? I just want to get in the practice of that kind of language. The way we speak often informs the way we think. So that's just sort of some basic ground rules for that. With that, I'm excited to be able to walk through this. This has been a big priority for I think the city for a long time. Ever since I've gotten here, I've heard we need to address historic preservation and commercial zoning. So I very purposefully wanted to put both of these things together on the table at the same time. And the reason why is because it's hard to read through this code and have for example, the commercial zoning stuff and have an understanding of well, how does a historic piece fit into it? And then separately, if I were to just to give you the historic piece, you'd be asking, well, how does this fit into the larger context of what we're trying to do with the other pieces? I have not put out yet a discussion draft of the zoning administration, which explains permitting generally, how you file for a permit, the new rules related to non-conforming, time expirations, time limits, the review authority, the basic stuff that sort of helps us govern the zoning ordinance. We'll get to that, but it's really, I think would have been too much because that's 25 pages itself. So we'll get to that. We'll get to that next. That'll probably be a couple weeks out. And that just leaves us a little bit of breathing room to look at these codes. What I thought would be helpful is just to walk through the commercial stuff. But I want to ask, what I think it'd be helpful to me to see what are the major things that sort of you initially, feel and how your initial reactions are to what's here. Do you want to talk about the historic preservation stuff and sort of understand that very specific and detailed framework, or would you rather dive into the downtown red line of the commercial A, B, and C codes? What's going to be most helpful for you as a commission to begin to digest this stuff? My thoughts were we dive into the commercial ABC stuff first, and once we were kind of fluid with that, we'd turn our attention, which might not even be this meeting, then we'd turn our attention to historic. So, Chair, that's my sort of first question for you as a commission is what will be your preference? Because I'm here at your pleasure.
Bill, I'm seeing nods for your plan.
The
So
commercial stuff first. Does that make some sense?
Yeah.
Okay. Because the historic really is its own language and its own vernacular and whatnot. And I'm very grateful that we have two members of the Arts, Culture, and Historic Preservation Commission here to listen and participate at your calling, Chair. But let's do that. Why don't we just pull up the code? Jason promised to drive again and pull up the red line version of the code that we posted on our website, and we just start at the top.
Bill, 1 second. Commissioner Benner?
Should we hold questions until you get through it, or do you?
No, there's too long. I think we'd get lost. We don't have to get through this all in one night.
Okay.
I don't anticipate that we will. Again, I want my goal is that you understand it and that you as a commission can decide what might be savory or unsavory or want to change or scrap the whole thing and start afresh. We want to spend the time you need for this. I
Suggest we allot a certain amount of time for commercial, like you said, and then maybe we can move on to historic preservation with a certain amount of time as well.
if that's what you like, let's see how far we get, and we'll spend an hour on this, and after that we'll see how we feel. So why don't we just go from there?
Mr. Chair, one thing.
Yeah.
Yeah, just
Commissioner
real quick,
Simmons.
I might recommend, because you've been so close to this, and
Yeah.
you've seen to some extent how this is at odds with itself. If there's decisions and conversations that you need us to have tonight,
Right.
To like remove roadblocks so you can take care of the next thing, I'd say bring them up.
I'll do that. I think suffice to say that the boundaries of these districts are going to be important. So I think it's going to be easier for you to understand how to look at these boundaries once you understand what would fill them in. And then we can come back to that. That might be something we do at the very end. What I mean by the end, it could be a month and a half from now. It doesn't have to be tonight, certainly. A little minor detail, I think, but I think it's important. We can come up with new names for these. Right now, downtown core and outer core are very specifically used terms that I wanted to use to evoke some thought. But once we understand what the content of the code is, we can name these things whatever we want. But they're intended to get us thinking in planning terms and thinking a little bit differently about things. So they're intended to be evocative, but they could be replaced because in the end, the labels that we have on things can matter, and they can also assist in helping us fulfill something. So with that, let's take. Does that make sense? We'll look at all this is on the table, but let's look first at the very top of the red line of the A, B, and C. What was interesting to me is that when you introduce the downtown core and outer core, some of the sentences that were already worded almost suggest that it's natural for us to have some refinement here. Mainly that piece right there that says, halfway through, the city's downtown designated as, and I put in there, commercial core and outer core is so important and significant that it justifies a special set of regulations. Yet that language was associated with commercial A, this very large thing that included lots of things that weren't even in the downtown. So just some tightening up of that right there. That's certainly not a regulatory thing, but it's the purpose and intent can help us when we get stuck in the woods. We kind of go back to the statement and see what we're trying to pull off and try to do. So let's just scroll down, Jason. And Commission, please just jet in if something doesn't make sense. We want to talk about it. The whole point here, again, is to try to create a geography that really is relevant to what we all think the downtown is and ask ourselves if these land use regulations make sense for that area. And then we can adjust and shift from there. So let's keep scrolling down. These are just the basic purpose statements and whatnot. Applicability, this is just basically to establish, yes, these rules are going to apply to the things that are zoned downtown core, outer core, and commercial A, B, and C. Pretty important to have the applicability statement in a code. Now, this stuff is these are the allowed land uses, right? So there's a couple things I would probably change in this table. This is really important. Okay, so this is where things really start to matter very quickly. It's like, okay, we're off the tarmac and now we're instantly into turbulence here, right? We've got to think about what makes sense in terms of allowable land uses. As a way to code, we can say things are permitted, then put a number on it and look at the number and say you can't do things on upper floors or lower floors or whatever. There's different ways to do that. Those are sort of details, but in terms of allowed land uses, in a downtown, for example, it's your walk, shop, eat, entertain sort of atmosphere. So when you begin to think about how we might want to limit that or not have auto-oriented uses there or things that aren't really activity generators there, then your mind kind of goes back to that map and like, okay, do we get the geography right? And then a little bit later on, when we're talking about building heights, then it's going to force you back to that map. Okay, do we get the boundaries right? So in any given regulation we have, you're going to find yourself going back to that map saying, well, gosh, what about this corner or that building or this half a block or whatever, and asking ourselves, do we get the geographies right given these rules? So we can tweak the geographies, we can tweak the rules, we can tweak both. So it's all on the table. This was a first cut in order to get us talking and thinking to see if this is an idea we want to move forward with. But it made some sense to me that where I put, this is an existing list of land uses that was already in the code, and we just extrapolated it out for downtown core and outer core. Makes sense to me that we would not have commercial storage, which is a completely dead space, in the heart of your downtown. And I would argue that may not be something we want to see in any of the commercial districts. That may be something you want to relegate to an industrial area, thinking about what happens in these buildings, right?
Mr. Chair, you're talking about store or commercial storage that's not connected with the business itself? I mean.
That's right.
Okay.
That's a standalone commercial storage. That's how that would be, right? You know, any one of these businesses is going to have storage in the back for their, but what we're talking about here is like a commercial storage business. That's what their enterprise is. Right here, we also have laundromats and dry cleaners. You know, not something that's sort of typical in our main street. So we called it out as such here as not being allowed on the main street for the downtown core. And same with things like, you know, manufacturing that's ancillary to a storefront. And the reason why the manufacturing ancillary to a storefront made sense, in my opinion, to limit it is not being permitted in the downtown core is because those operations can really gobble up a whole lot of the square footage, and they just have a tiny little front office that really serves as the point of interaction with customers and things. So again, for your main street, your main living room as a community, I thought that maybe it's more appropriate to have that stuff off the main drag. These are the types of things that this commission is going to ultimately have to weigh in on and say, yes, city council, these are things we as a commission think make sense, or no, they don't. And, you know, from there. Why don't we scroll down a little bit, please? So carrying on with this table, we've got, I think the real big one here is offices. We talked about this as a team, didn't think it was appropriate to just single out one particular office type and rather just call it offices. You know, this offices, the reason why I think it's interesting in this context is because we separately call out banks, we separately call out medical, we separately call out professional services, things like that. Office is just relegated to a smaller handful of, you know, types of offices that could be there. And the question, I mean, it's going to be a tough question for the community. Do we want to limit that to areas that are right off your main drag or upper stories? So you can reserve that space, again, for the intended function is to be this walk, shop, eat atmosphere that's got most of your activity generators. So I'm going to pause right there, and we're going to talk a little bit about this.
But I think this is kind of a technical question. It's not a
Okay.
it's not a preferential one, but the way in the downtown core column, the way offices are treated, there is an N for not permitted with a footnote of 9.
Right.
And then in multi-residential use, you have to scroll down, but multi-residential use in religious institutions, it is permitted with the same footnote 9.
Right.
And all three of them mean that you can do it
Right.
above. So my question is, why did offices get an N
Right.
with a footnote that says put it up in the second story or above, and the other two got to go ahead, do it?
Good question. I'll give a very simple answer. We're trying to figure out I know exactly what you're talking about. And as I wrote this table, I was quite aware of the fact that we had a difference there. I'm not sure what's going to make the most sense in the end, honestly. I thought, well, let's talk about it. I mean, it really doesn't make that much of a difference. I kind of like the idea of having the table jump out at you a little bit more and have an N there saying no, and then really get the notes to something a little less significant. So it's a style. Honestly, it's a stylistic thing. I prefer the N, but I put them both in here for this exact reason to say, hey, you know, we are coding. What's clearer? I think the N is a lot clearer than the number that you'd see later in the multifamily. Okay. So I would, in that example, I would switch the multifamily out to be, you know, whatever the example is here, to being an N with the footnote.
But the bottom line is that offices are allowed so long as they are above the first floor.
That's right. And not sure if that's something we want to do. It's really, you also have to keep in mind in how zoning works, right? If you're already there today, you can be there tomorrow. If this ordinance were adopted, you could exist as long as you want to exist. It's only after it goes dark for 6 months or more, that's when the space has to be a conforming land use. So it could theoretically be there forever. There's an example of a non-conforming use I'll give you right now. We all know where Safeway is located, in the liquor store that's just to the south of it. Right in between, there's this little drive-up coffee kiosk. The coffee kiosk is not allowed by a number of rules in our zoning ordinance, but it's been there for 40 years. It's non-conforming. If that were ever to go dark for, you know, the way the current ordinance is worded, by the way, it's 2 years, 2 years or longer, then you know, I'm suggesting we change that to 6 months, and that's part of the code. I'm going to bring you in a couple weeks. But that's an example of how you can continue to enjoy a business until such time as it goes dark for a period of time, and in which case it only a conforming use could be in. So theoretically, we've done a little bit of counting on this. I think there's 7 or 8 office spaces that are being used in the core that would be non-conforming. They can continue to enjoy themselves and even change businesses out. It's just that the land use changes or goes dark for 6 months. That's at which point you'd have to have a conforming use come in. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
Yeah. But I mean, we don't have to, belabor it. I mean, it's just, I put it out there. I think that it's worth discussion. So
Is this list sort of certainly non-inclusive, right?
yeah, this is the list you have. This is it.
Is it the list we should have as a city, I guess would be my question. Meaning, so gas stations, are you allowed?
No.
How do we know that, looking at this?
Good question. Here's why. Because there are other zone districts where they are allowed.
Yeah.
And if they are allowed in another zone district
Okay.
expressly, then they are not allowed by virtue of being omitted here.
Got it.
So if you're not expressly permitted, you are not allowed to exist.
Grocery stores?
Grocery stores are listed here as, what are they listed as? Like a retail, that's a typical retail.
Retail, trade and service?
Yeah, exactly.
Okay, so liquor store would be in that.
Mhm.
Car wash? Same thing with like a gas station?
Car wash, exactly. That's, I believe it's identified in another zone district, even though we have one downtown.
Got it.
And that, by the way, that I think would remain in commercial A. That wouldn't be part of the downtown outer core.
still right outside. Okay.
But that's right. It doesn't mean we can't amplify and clarify this. That comes up quite a bit. We'll have people come to the counter. The way I look at it is when these zones were created, they largely put the permitted uses where we wanted them and called out some things that were not permitted, but there wasn't a whole lot of overlap as it relates to the issue you just brought up. And the only way I can interpret that is if it's not expressly identified, then it's not permitted.
Got it.
This is a table that really tells you what you can do.
And is offices defined by a non-public facing workspace? Meaning we have legal offices downtown, we have real estate offices downtown, we have lots of office space on the first floor downtown.
That's right.
I mean,
But what constitutes office space?
Well, what I think the way you arrive at that is there another land use that makes better sense?
Yeah.
For that to be, if there's something close, like for example, medical dental services. I mean, you could say, oh, I went to my doctor's office, but this code clearly calls out that it's
Doctor,
medical,
yep.
that it's a medical dental type of a service.
But can I ask a question, Bill?
Sure.
What's like the biggest business downtown? Coachella, right? Like how many people does it bring downtown to go to?
We are not publicly facing.
No, I know, but what I mean is that it
Right.
brings 50, 60 employees downtown every day that
That's right.
eat at restaurants, that shop at.
Absolutely.
that
Great.
Get their haircuts, that buy stuff at the
Yeah.
outline shop, that, and then they go on to donate soccer jerseys.
Absolutely. That's a major generator of activity in downtown. It's driving all those people in every day. I can't recall if that's in the outer core or
The inner,
It's in.
that's in the
Yeah.
downtown.
yeah. So again, it's those are the types of things that are worth discussing, right? That's precisely why we're going through this exercise to say, well, did we get these geographies right? Let's massage this, because you do want to have those employers downtown. The question is whether or not you want to have them on your main street.
Well, where would they be otherwise?
Do you want to have a major employer right there on, let's say it took up half a block on First at Cedar? And that's going to be dark during the weekends. It's not going to be your activity generator. Again, it causes you to have to think along those terms, right? Is there one space? And that's really the question. Is there one space that we want to have for that? Let me back up for a second. Let me give you kind of 3 big things that I've sort of arrived at myself in thinking about Sandpoint. And specifically this assignment. And I may be wrong, but these are sort of the 3 things I keep coming back to. Number 1 is I believe that this community wants to have a downtown and wants to have a place that people can associate as being the downtown. There's things programmed at Canada, there's the farmers market, there's City Beach, there's a sense of civic and cultural enjoyment certainly. And I think that that's something that's very much desired. I think it's in your policy documents, but I've felt it and experienced it myself. Secondly, I don't think that this place wants to identify a place as a little Disneyland that's just for tourists. I don't think that that little special spot that's off to the side that's not connected to the community or used otherwise, that's, oh yeah, that's just for tourists, right? I just don't feel that. Maybe I'm wrong. And the third sort of thing that's driving a lot of my thinking on this is I don't believe that we're trying to create an investment strategy that suggests that big development is going to be our savior. I think this community is wanting to preserve and plan for a common enjoyment of downtown and our spaces that doesn't rely on or have to be functional because you've got some new big shiny thing. I think it's a harder that's easy. That's easy. Allow a big hotel here, allow a big hotel there, allow a big hotel there. What's much harder is doing what we're trying to do is to say, well, how can this be meaningful for a long duration? That's specific in responding to what I think this community is saying. That's where I'm putting my energy. So those three things, those are the three lenses I keep looking through as I'm evaluating code. That's not the case with every city. Some cities are like, look, we need a serious economic development strategy, waterfront redevelopment. This is all eggs kind of go in that basket. I haven't felt that, and I haven't read that, and I'm feeling like, yeah, there's opportunity sites certainly, but I don't think this exercise is about how to try to perfect a code for a few sites. Rather, it's trying to create a space for the community. And it brings me back to, does it make sense that we have some limitations on one part of it? For the purposes of the walk, shop, eat, the closer to the longer duration of enjoyment from sunup to sundown, not just business hours. So how do you begin to create that and concentrate that in one space?
Can I ask you, like, what kind of development do you see? So, for instance, now you got the building that's for sale on the corner. I can't remember. It's like just on the other side of where the mango tree is.
Uh-huh.
It used to be Caldwell Banker. It's, it's like a quarter of an acre. Got a parking lot. It's that old blue house.
Yeah, it's got the tree stump with the tabletop on top of it.
Yeah.
So
Like, what do you see down there?
I'm going to flip the answer. What do you visualize? I'm asking this question. What do we as a city visualize? That you have to phrase that question that way because you have to look left and right when you ask that question.
I don't know, but I didn't write that. I didn't redline the code. I mean,
I know, I realize that. And I'm going to be very difficult on you guys as a commission on this issue. I'm going to be very difficult. So you guys can throw things at me if you want, but you're going to have to look at your fellow commissioners and say, why would we want to do that?
Yeah, I mean,
and I can weigh in on that conversation, but that's the conversation you have to have amongst yourselves.
I mean, I'm just saying, like, we want to have more restaurants, right?
Yes.
Like, sure, but you can't get a liquor license. Like, you can't.
But those things change over time.
We don't control that. I mean, and you can't.
Good question. So
Like, you can't make margins in a restaurant without liquor licenses.
Right.
No.
So I'm not looking at this through the lens of tax policy, state permits, things like that. I'm looking at the planned built environment, that trying to create something that's durable and responsive to what I think the community is saying. The on the ground realities of how businesses are run, obviously is important to us, right? We want to make sure land use regulations work, but I can't be worried about liquor licenses for this exercise. I just can't, because that can change like that. And then we're left with a code that if we design it for that, then what have we done? But I'm really sensitive to the question, what do I visualize? No. You need to tell me, why would we visualize this? Because that's a conversation that you need to, your role as commissioners is a big one here. And so that question needs to be like looking left and right. So why would we want to do this? And I can help with the discussion, but this is going to be an exercise that's best serves this community if we do it the way I'm suggesting.
Bill, I'd see that location as being law offices, since it's so close to the courthouse and surrounding that area. There's several law offices right in that
Right.
core area.
Yeah.
It's almost like maybe that's kind of that type of district there.
And that, I believe, is,
It's in the outer core.
Yeah.
it's in the outer core, so that's a place where offices on ground floor, as it's currently worded, would be allowed, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, and the whole thing, by the way, could be that.
But I'm also thinking like, you know, like on Main Street, you know, like in between, like where there used to be the Tomlinson's building on the corner of Second and Main.
Right.
And there, the jujitsu place or whatever that karate place is, there's a huge
Right.
parking lot, right? To me, that's like a missed opportunity for development in the downtown core.
Have you seen the parking lot get redeveloped?
Yeah, no, I'm like,
Yeah.
what would I want to see in
Yeah.
there, right?
Right.
Like,
No, that's a great thinking. Yeah, exactly. Share with us your ideas. What would you like to see there?
I don't know. I have no idea. I mean, I'm not an entrepreneur like that, you know?
Well, no, but you're a city planning commissioner that cares a lot about this community.
Is your mic on?
Oh, sorry. Yeah.
No one on Zoom can hear you if you're not speaking.
Yeah, we got in
Sorry.
trouble with that, by the way, last week. I got a big spanking.
Yeah, council member said, please remind your commissioners to speak to the mic because they couldn't hear some of you at the last.
Yeah.
Okay. I don't know. I mean, there's several spots down there. I mean, like Shakopee or whatever that place is called, the flower place that used to be a gas station back in the day, the holes in the ground, you know, I mean, I think there's a reason that these aren't getting developed, is that there's a limited, I mean, there's only so many people coming downtown that are not in the part of the summer season and on a good ski year.
Mm-hmm.
You know, these guys that come to Coachella that make a good living bring certain value to downtown, to the businesses that need them every, you know, in the shoulder seasons and in the summer too. I mean,
I agree. I think we're trying to make a place where it's compelling to invest.
right.
That is absolutely top of mind. It's make it compelling to invest. Right now, what are the obstacles? Is it hard to get a bank loan for a new building on there? You bet. Is it hard to do that's going to be a tough conversation. So what we're trying to do is the first step, and that is, let's look at our land use rules and see if we can remove some barriers and create some, momentum by suggesting some new ideas and try to get some energy to look at this. And the question then for you commissioners is, does it make sense if you look at the list of allowable land uses, all those sites you just mentioned, you take a look at that table of land uses, does that kind of match with what you're visualizing? Could you visualize that? If we allow retail across the whole of the city, and moreover, if you require it on ground floor across everything that's commercial, 500 acres of it all, what have we done? So it's a difficult exercise, and I think, Commissioner, you're asking a perfect question. But I need you guys to weigh in on, like, do those land use restrictions? One way to begin to arrive at the answer and is to look at that table that we've produced and visualize the sites that you just listed and ask yourself and ask your fellow commissioners, is this making some sense or not? That would be very helpful. I think that's probably really the only way to approach it is you visualize these sites and you ask yourself, well, does this make sense? Given that larger kind of picture I was sharing.
I mean, I just have a question about like professional services, lawyers, like your friend who built the architect who's built that new beautiful blue house on Church Street. I mean, Glahey surveying, there's a lot of stuff that people come there for. That's
Yes.
not just like walking around looking at necklaces, which that's what we can, whatever, the rock store on.
Right.
Whatever.
I
love that
had a
stuff, too.
thought, just a general thought on that. The offices downtown, because like recently worked on a project that it's an office for a lawyer and a CPA right on Second Avenue, and that would no longer be allowed in the new zoning. Which, but the argument
It's a
about
beautiful
engaging
job.
those street fronts, like, because it's on one side and Stephen will drop the shade on the window, and you don't even really get to like engage with the building after hours. So I think there's like a good point about somehow creating that engagement along the storefront, but is there a way to still have office space when a certain like building footprint is so large where, okay, like this isn't going to be all restaurant, this isn't all going to be retail. Like what if 50% of this became office, So maybe there's like a way to allow office on the first floor, but still give priority to other more public, like pedestrian engaging businesses on the street front itself. If it's the front half becomes public engagement and the back half could become offices. I don't know, how detailed we need to get in this, like that number 9 footnote. But that's just the thought, like allow some office space, or if it's a 1-story building, they no longer can have an office there at all. It's just a thought, like can there be a little bit of both? Maybe not all or nothing.
I think the good news is that out of your land use table that you've constructed, largely we're just talking about should office be in or out, right? And how could it be in, how could it be out? Ultimately, we think about all of the permitted uses. All those folks are going home at 5, at 6, right? Anyway, so I could make the case that to bring in a new office space that's you pack full of fresh blood that's all making a pretty good wage in downtown, and they spend that money downtown, there's some real benefit there. However, you don't want it all to be office space because then it truly is dead. So along the lines that were just mentioned, if there's carve-outs are going to get super tough on this, especially when it's percentages and things like that.
I can't imagine how
Right,
you would do
insane.
that.
And this might be as insane, but could something be handled with, again, an overlay? Meaning these are the places specifically downtown that are preserved for the public facing experience, which your retails and things like that. And it would probably be a subset inside of that historic overlay district that we see here as a potential other way to handle it.
Yeah, that's exactly right. I would argue let's shrink the green as opposed to add another layer of complexity.
Okay. Oh, I see what you're saying.
My initial take on the green was about half as big as it is now.
Okay.
But it's a bit of a team sport, at City Hall at times. And
You could shrink that. You could create some, I'll call it light restrictions on the outer core to preserve the types of things we're talking
just
about.
visualize the outer core with the restrictions we have and just making the outer core a little bit larger, and then the downtown core a little bit smaller. I mean, what you're doing with the outer core is you're allowing ground floor multifamily, right? Which is a really big deal. A real recipe for activating your streets, driving disposable income to be available for that core is to have it right next door, right? And again, visualize the purple, because you see the purple on the map. Right now, the purple color covers all of it. And the purple right now says ground floor has to be retail. And that's taking your precious retail and spreading it out over literally hundreds of acres.
Yeah.
And what this exercise is saying, there's something special about downtown in terms of trying to create some activity and concentrate some of that activity. Let's concentrate it, and then the stuff that's right around it, let's promote some things that generate the disposable income right next door.
Gotcha. Mr. Chairman? Commissioner Reimer?
What I'm thinking, so when you have offices, people show up to an office, let's say for every 100 square feet, one person, or something to that effect. And rarely are they going to carpool. So the thing about having offices in the downtown where you want a place that is active and where retail shops, restaurants, etc., can flourish and grow. You don't want people parking, or you're going to have to build more parking or permit areas of parking for those people that are going to be in offices downtown. Because once they go in the office, maybe real estate agents go in and out, but most people, they show up and they do their job for 8 hours a day and then they're gone. And so I kind of agree with that phasing of some of the offices out of First and Second, maybe not so much Second, but certainly First. And maybe because parking is already hard on First Avenue. I mean, seriously, if I want to get a donut, I got to show up at 7:15. You know what I mean? You gotta really want it. Yeah, and so, but now you go over to Second or Third, even during midday, you can maybe find some open parking, and then you have the big parking area. So certain sections of what you now call the downtown core, the west end of that, would be more open to offices because the downtown parking's right there. There are some spaces between the buildings, Pine, Right there at Second Avenue, you've got a pretty good sized parking lot, right behind Cachava. And, but yeah, having offices that have employees that show up and work at that office all day on First Avenue, unless you give them someplace to park off of First Avenue, they're tying it up. I know it's only 2 hour parking, but I mean, I know that when we do construction projects, sometimes we've had to
Right.
every 2 hours go out and move the car unless we get a permit to be there.
Like, I mean, retail places also have employees that park and drive downtown. I mean, like, if you go to the bakery on the corner of First and Cedar, they have 6 or 8 people working in there, and they all have to park somewhere. And I would say that I mean, at least we have retail we have an office on the First Avenue. We rent parking spaces elsewhere because we don't want to park in front of those spaces because we want people to be able to
Right.
park there and come in. to our offices.
We did a pretty deep
And we get
dive
ticketed.
on parking
Yeah.
with everybody. And if we can, I'd love to put parking in a parking garage for the purpose of this, because we have so much to get through. I mean, I think it's important to be aware of, but if I could glue together the comments I just heard from Commissioner Mitchell and Commissioner Remar about, Cachava and the productivity you get from the office, the importance of it, it's sounding like that outer core needs to expand a little bit, and maybe this downtown core needs to shrink a little bit. And, selectively, very strategically, literally building by building, block by block matters. That's what this exercise is about, ultimately. So,
So let's maybe stress test that. I mean, what would be the appetite of the commission to limit retail specifically on First and around the bend? Right? So it would be right in the
Like,
middle of that.
first, from where it is now, up around Cedar, and just
Yep.
keep it to both sides of First Avenue, up and around.
Like Cedar to Third or
Yeah,
something.
exactly. Yeah. Because I like the idea of concentrating the retail experience within a fairly narrow geographic footprint.
Yeah, and again, it's what we mean by concentrate, just so we're all clear, commissioners, is that it's allowed elsewhere. It's just not required to be on the ground floor,
Yep.
which opens up the opportunity for multifamily and offices and other things to occupy that space. But right now, by requiring on the ground floor, you've just disseminated it. It's like butter over too much bread.
Yeah.
Mm.
So I think that's okay. We're now we're cooking with gas. This is exactly where we were supposed to get.
I think shrinking the downtown, the inner core is
Interesting
definitely,
look at.
yeah.
Yep.
And it's really this idea of the office thing that's driving that, right? Okay.
Seems to be the big one.
Okay.
I just have a question, really. Is Cachava really an office, or is it a business where people come and work?
It's
It's an office.
I'm not
That's
sure
a professional
the
office.
difference, but yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, but
Yes.
so to go back, but also like when we're talking about like real estate offices,
Right.
we are open to the public. You can come in there
Say
anytime.
hi.
Like, so how do we
Well, again,
like figure that out? Like,
well, it's a good question. In the end, we don't have to do this limitation. This is a
or law offices, you can go into Jacob's office and walk in the door.
you might be there for 10 seconds before you're escorted out, but yeah, you're right, you can. But yeah, no, but my point is it's really about activity generation is what I'm getting at.
Yeah.
That's really what it is. What are those activity generators? And that's kind of where we are. And it's not just looking at what might be happening inside any given office. I'm looking at the zoning for this city, and I'm like, boy, this is huge. I mean, we've got hundreds and hundreds of acres of commercial zoning in a city of, less than 10,000 people. So part of it is melding these ideas of try to carve out a little something special. It has to come down with the typical experience of activity generation. Retail, high incidence of transaction, high incidence of coming and going. Same with restaurants. Same with entertainment venues, that kind of thing. Bars, there's lots of people coming and going all the time. Offices, not quite as much. It's just that simple. But this is not a dogmatic thing. This is,
So can I keep asking questions? Sorry. One thing I was thinking of since our last meeting a month ago was, one way to like funnel more things to the downtown would be to restrict the area where where commercial is permitted outside the current, this pink,
Right.
the outer core.
Yep.
Because it's, right now, the disbursement of retail, of commercial, it's ugly. And it leads to this kind of diffusion of people and where business is taking place. And if we were to think about, instead of restricting what goes on downtown, like in the downtown core, or if we were to say, let's shrink the purple and push everybody towards the downtown core, to me, I would love to see that.
I think I'm going to if I could bestow upon you the AICP certification in this moment, I would. I'm not kidding you. That is precisely what I think the third step is.
Okay.
First step, commercial downtown, defining the downtown, writing some reasonable rules. Second step, this historic preservation thing. The third, which was I envisioned was going to come after we could get our heads around the other two, is a concerted effort at looking at commercial A, B, and C that remains, and asking ourselves what needs to be rezoned to something else, so that you can begin to winnow that down. It's just too much.
Just Commissioner Mitchell, one change that Bill's already proposing that you are considering tonight that's in the red line version is allowing residential on the ground floor of all of our commercial zones besides the downtown core. That's a huge change that over, we're talking in terms of decades here, over generations, when it'll make new development in our commercial zones, our vast commercial zones, more appealing to those developers who are considering, investing in Sandpoint, but they don't see the need because there's no need for sellable or rentable commercial space in this town because there's almost infinite commercial space available.
Right, yeah.
So allowing them to come in and do housing when we have a real housing crisis in this town, in this vast swath of Sandpoint that currently prohibits housing, will put that squeeze over the years, over the decades on commercial space. You want to drive that commercial demand into our downtown core so that becomes a vibrant downtown commercial space, and downtown is not competing with these random low rent commercial spaces on the periphery, which over time should be redeveloped as housing with disposable income and people looking for places to shop and eat.
And your idea is exactly the same one that I have. It's just that this exercise is so big that I wanted to focus on something that was a little bit more of a manageable chunk than start to go way out from downtown and talk about comp plan and rezonings. I think what we need to do first, maybe I'm wrong. I mean, we could chew gum and run and, bicycle and ski at the same time, right? I mean, it's a lot, but I honestly think it's better if we keep that in the back of our mind, knowing that I think that's an exercise we all need to go through, which is a little bit more time consuming, frankly. The changes that you can see in that land use table are modest, but they're obviously getting people's wheels turning and whatnot. So
I think, if as a first sort of action item coming out of tonight, it would be using the land use table as is, but expanding the outer core, shrinking the inner core, taking a look at a new footprint.
We'll take another crack at that. I think the Coachella piece obviously is an obvious one. We'll take a look at. There's some stuff that's up around Cedar and Third that's on my mind as well. I want to take a look at that as well.
Related to that, topography or the downtown core, like what is the heartbeat of Sandpoint? I remember we went through this when I was in that design competition group. 4 different teams from all over, kind of figuring out like where do people gather in Sandpoint, and we couldn't really find like one spot. If you really think about it, it's like, well, people go to First Avenue to shop, but there's the Farm and Park for the farmers market. I mean, you kind of go down to the waterfront for activities, and so it's kind of spread out. But so I don't know if we really came up with like the one location, but it did seem like Main Street and like the Farm and Park area is a hub. And I'm kind of looking at the downtown core zoning that we're talking about here, creating that like engagement along that street. And right now it's not there's no real buildings facing Farm Park, for example, but you could imagine a future where there are restaurants along there facing the park. It's just a very engaging landscape. And I could see that downtown core maybe kind of shifting a little bit and almost kind of bulging out at that Farm Park area potentially.
Makes total sense. Yeah, that's exactly the kind of thinking we need to kick around.
Yeah, Connie's.
Yep. Yep.
Yeah, Connie's, yeah, when they have events going on, they kind of overflow into the park a little bit, but that was one thought as I was looking at the map.
Yeah.
I
Yeah.
mean, it wouldn't be about, I mean, we're open to just workshopping this. I mean, you guys have ideas.
Like what you got.
The idea of squeezing that downtown core by perhaps allowing some ground floor office. I mean, keep in mind, the only difference here is residences and offices on the ground floor. Where would we prefer, where would you prefer to allow residences and offices on the ground floor? How far into that, white outlined area, the historic overlay district, which is treated completely differently in our amendments that we're working on. But I hear a good conversation going on the dais around perhaps squeezing that core to create even more scarcity and more.
My first cut at this, to that point, my first cut at this would, if you were to take that red cursor you just had and draw it south from where you were, just that entire section along Second, the western portion, all that would be in the outer core, and just squeezing that downtown core into all the way down. And down there, I think I'm gonna have to go walk that again, But that's kind of the idea. And then we could take a look up on the northern side as well. Just putting a little bit of a squeeze on that.
I had a question about the footnote number 1 for the residential allowance on first floor. It says it includes demonstrated functional space and storefront character while still being residential, or can you clarify what that?
Okay, let's take a look. This is an existing note. So, okay, so yes, here's my thinking on that. So residential uses are permitted on upper stories above ground floor non-residential use, on ground floor behind storefront space, or integrated into a mixed-use structure where design, and the usage just say it's consistent with the storefront character. I use the words includes demonstrated functional space because down in the design standards, we arrive at expanding the categories of things you've got to have in terms of design standards. And one of them was, in one draft anyway, some words related to functional space that I think now have taken on a different title. There's like 8 or 10 sort of design parameters we included. Originally, one of those was titled like functional space. I think I changed the name of it, but it didn't update this particulars. But that's the concept, is like, yeah, you can do it provided that you meet this design thing we're looking at to make sure we don't lose the vibe and the character down there. That's the idea behind that.
Also, just clarifying that our goal here isn't to, and keep in mind, this would only be in the outer core and the rest of the commercial zones. In the inner core now. What we would hate to see is a development that came along and provided some tokenistic expression of storefront character on the ground floor, only to achieve upper floor residential. That idea, the ground floor in the downtown core must demonstrate functionality as an actual commercial space. You can't just have a fake storefront with whatever empty space behind it with apartments upstairs or condos upstairs.
I just want to, if I may, go back to the subject of offices for a moment. And listening to my colleagues on the dais, I got the impression that there was a concern that there was basically a prohibition. And I just want to reaffirm that as proposed, anything above the first floor can be an office. Is that correct?
Yeah.
Okay. And I know nothing about development or investing in property or anything else, but what is it about for an office now? What is it about the first floor that makes someone want to build and occupy an office versus walking up a flight of stairs or an escalator and working in a second floor with windows and everything else. I mean, I might personally prefer to be higher up where I could see things and enjoy the scenery. So I, I, I don't, I think what we're concerned about is that if we don't allow offices on the first floor, we're not going to have any offices downtown, and we're going to lose the opportunity to have all these people who work and then, let's go to a bar after work and, get to know each other better kind of experience that won't happen. And that's not my assumption, but maybe people know more than I do about the fact that if we keep it the way it is, we're never going to have another office downtown again. Can people inform me a little bit more about this? I don't know. I mean,
Mr. Chairman?
Commissioner Romar.
Yeah, well, one thing, as a builder, I'm just bringing up, is that a lot of the buildings over the years, from my experience, have been grandfathered in and haven't been required elevators. But if you look at the current ICB, International Building Code, or IBC, excuse me, I don't know the numbers, but they aren't substantial when you do have to have elevators. And most of these buildings, you almost can't put one in. I mean, in existing building, you almost have to start from, scratch one. And when you're building the building, saying, okay, we're gonna have a pit here for the elevator to hold the hydraulics, because there has to be a pit below the level of the bottom floor, and you take it on up. So in that sense, yeah, because like if you go to Second and Cedar, the building right there on the corner, there's offices, there's a stairway, it goes out on Cedar, and going up, that's a heck of a stairway. It's almost one that wouldn't be allowed right now, because I think it's like 23 steps or something like that. And I think you have to have a landing at 20 or something like that. So
Yeah,
the
there's-
upstairs is, as long as they're grandfathered in, they work as offices. And as long as the people are ambulatory, they work as offices. But if it's not ambulatory, was just bringing that up. That's all.
So keep in mind, the downtown is both of these districts, right? Downtown is flavor 1 and flavor 2, whatever we label them. Right now, it's downtown core and outer core. So you can do offices downtown. In fact, you can do them everywhere. Just this little tiny piece of it, you can't do it on the first floor. One way to think about downtowns, and I mean, Commissioner Weber may be familiar with these things, and maybe Commissioner Benner, having been a planner, a professional planner, is this idea of how you experience the street, right? You're experiencing, you're not designing this street for the experience at 45 miles an hour. You're designing this street, or 25 miles an hour. You're designing this street for 3 miles an hour, because that's how fast you'll walk. And you need to have something to draw your attention at least every 25 feet, or you're going to be losing the experience. That's different when you're driving, right? When you're driving, buildings are designed for, there's a whole different set of thoughts that go into when you're talking about designing for something that's at 35 miles an hour versus walking at 3. So part of it is just what can you expect and what do you want to see when you're walking 3 miles an hour? How much of dead space do you want to create? So you're trying to create as much activity as you can within these buildings, and that's what gets us to this idea of, well, should we be careful with where we allow offices to be, knowing that 1 block away they can go anywhere they want. And so I think it's a good conversation to have. I think that, coupled with the idea of what nonconforming is, we certainly don't have to arrive at a decision tonight. This is not a hearing. There's property owners you're going to hear from, and all that too. But for tonight's purposes, I appreciate the sense that I'm getting. There's some concern. There's also some interest. There's maybe we solve the problem by shrinking the core where that limitation's a little more limited. Maybe that's a way to arrive at it for the next cut.
Correct me if I'm wrong, commissioners or anybody, just thinking about the history of the downtown, our inner core or our core, it seems like the trend has been that offices have been leaving that area for a considerable amount of time. I'd say over the last 30 years, I can think of at least a dozen office type establishments that have moved to another spot or just left, and not just real estate. So I wonder if that's by just because it is a little more difficult to park in some of those areas, or those businesses have not seen that to be like the best spot for them to to serve what their needs are.
I think it has to do with access to money. I think that's what it has to do with more than anything. I think it's a lot cheaper in some cases to go something that's predictable that the bank's going to understand that doesn't have this risk associated with, typically what you see in downtowns. That's why downtowns have hollowed out because capital goes to the next shiny, easy thing. The strip mall, the mall, the home center, as opposed to the local hardware store. Now it's Amazon centers and fulfillment centers. You can stay at home and hit click. That's where you want to build a fulfillment center. That's gonna be cheap dollars. I mean, that's easy. That's easy construction financing, right? Retrofitting downtown, that's expensive. That's risky. Who's done it recently? So you have to understand how capital flows and understand some of this as well. So, you know, that, and plus we allow it everywhere in Sandpoint, right? With this just wide open commercial zoning for huge swaths, you begin to see this picture of how it's easy to locate somewhere else. And I think that coupled with some businesses are going to want to have just a different experience, and they're going to have different, individual needs. Parking could be one of them. It could be because the CEO wants to live closer to, there's so many locational criteria, but generally speaking, a lot of it has to do with what's a safer bet money-wise. And what we're trying to do here is create some momentum so that you can create that safer bet by making this an attractive place to think again about investing in. Try to remove some of these land use hurdles like the ground floor retail requirement in a lot of it so that you can begin to see some other investment take hold and move forward. Like it or not, lots of controversy over that farm and flats, but that's a many, many millions of dollars building that's taking advantage and signaling that there's something here that's worth that investment. A lot of it had to do with parking, frankly, and not having a huge burden there. But anyway, I mean, it's a complex issue, right? I mean, that's what makes this thing such a special exercise.
How far north, I mean, what should our thought process be around the extension of the core northward? So we just talked about limiting it maybe to everything west of Second becomes the outer core.
Right.
Take a look at that. How far north should we go? Meaning the hospital.
The hospital is kind of the end point, right?
But it's not going to be there forever. What do we want that to be in 20 years when the hospital isn't there, for instance?
I don't. That's a good question. Maybe that's a problem for tomorrow and not today. I don't know. That is an activity generator for certain.
But the hospital also recognizes they can't stay there.
Yeah.
Right. So that's on their radar.
I think that's important to think about. I don't know exactly how we plan for that eventuality. It'd be nice to make sure we're touching that area with this core. In as much as, that's a very interesting thought. I've also had some people call in or email or wherever and say, hey, maybe this needs to be extended all the way down to, the signal down on Superior, and stretch it down there. This idea of the downtown core go that way. Just be more of a linear thing along First and maybe concludes up at the hospital, and that really is our main street that we're designing. That's another idea.
Yeah.
Can
Mr. Mitchell?
I mean, I know that this exercise is to talk about different uses in this place, but when you're talking about developing the downtown area, like are there ways that we can consider this exercise as part of a bigger picture to incentivize that kind of development down there?
I really think so, and I hope so. We have this particular tool we're using is your zoning ordinance, right? And that's going to get you as far as the zoning ordinance can get. But it's the beginning. I mean, this stuff never stops, right? It's sort of an all-in exercise. Is to get investment to take a second look at downtown. You need this step, right? We've got to get the zoning right and get some hurdles out of the way, for example, set clear expectations, and then it's what can we do to catalyze this stuff? How can SURA dollars be used strategically? What other, state programs are available for spurring development and whatnot? Like what are all the possible economic development incentives that could be used that are sort of reside outside of a zoning ordinance, but are very much part of a downtown revitalization strategy. Absolutely, this is just a piece because you're zoning, you were talking about allowed land uses, setback, that kind of stuff. I think what you're arriving at is how do you build that momentum with other tools, right? I mean, that's kind of what I'm hearing. Jason, you and I have spent a little bit of time talking about that ourselves in terms of other tools, SUR dollars.
Yeah,
Right.
the word incentivize often implies financial incentives.
Yeah.
I think what we're trying to do is,
What else is there for development but dollars?
well, true, but we're never gonna, like, zoning and code amendments aren't creating financial incentives necessarily. I mean, unless you interpret the ability to provide housing where it previously wasn't allowed to be provided as a financial incentive. And certainly there are some developers who are going to be more attracted to a zoning district where they don't have to put unrentable retail space on the ground floor that's going to cost them an extra $2-3 million to provide, and they're going to just lose money on year after year after year because rents are low, right? So if that's creating an incentive, that's not a direct financial subsidy in any form, but through the liberalization of our land use rules in our commercial zones, there are potential financial incentives that didn't exist before.
That's what I
Without
mean,
us spending a single dollar.
Right.
Yeah, that's what I'm talking. I mean,
Right.
yeah, obviously.
There are other, I mean, keep in mind, we have an urban renewal district in Sandpoint that literally is intended to create, private incentives to invest through our public sector investments. So the revitalization of First Avenue down to Superior, which we're in the design stage of right now, that will create a physical incentive, you could say, right? We're doing the code work. We're writing the code that's going to create the future of Sandpoint. The infrastructure down our right of way is the physical incentive. If there's a more beautiful frontage in front of your kind of dumpy old building, you now have an incentive to provide a higher private experience on your property that complements the public experience that the city's just spent $4 million providing, which is what we're going to spend on phase 3 revitalization.
I would say concentrating these land uses, lifting some restrictions. We've already tackled the parking thing to the degree that we could tackle it recently. That always, every few years you should revisit that kind of thing. So we're really incentivized that way. So we're beginning to start to collect a series of land use rules anyway that are more encouraging and easier for development.
Bill, if it's all right with you, and going back to Commissioner Simmons' just suggestion that we look at the northern perimeter of our downtown core, I think what would be really helpful is to hear from you all. Where do you want to see the lines drawn next time we bring this map back to you? I think, this is one, corner we've just discussed. Is this what you would like to see on the next version of this zoning map, or do you want to see the line more closely follow the historic district? You mentioned the hospital. We could carve that completely out of downtown and core or outer core. We could put that into the outer core. We could just say that's just regular commercial A. If you think about what's actually here now, you've got, some parking, you've got a title company, you've got McDuff's Brew Hall, you've got McDuff's Restaurant.
But you could bring it
Got a
over,
bank.
you could move it over to Third and go further north. You could go all the way up to.
This is Third right here.
Yeah, so keep going north. Because that's the
emergency
hospital.
room up there, yeah.
Yeah.
I can't go
So,
north. It's just this JPEG.
Yeah.
Yeah. But it would be helpful to get some actual specific boundaries that this commission would recommend we implement rather than us just.
I think part of the exercise is let's call this downtown core downtown. I don't know if we need to include the hospital in that.
Okay.
I'm going to do some thinking on that. I'm not sure if we need to include that in there. I think that, cities are dynamic. This is going to be looked at again in 20 years, and someone's going to come up with some things that might make some sense there in terms of redevelopment idea.
Yeah.
Calling it outer core might make some sense. That way it's at least got the protections for architecture and development, still applicable to that space.
What about the north side of Main Street here? This is the.
Well, I think Commissioner Weber had a really interesting point, and it's like,
The bank, yeah.
one way to think about downtowns your comments spurred this is like, this whole concept of this happenstance encounters and things like that, and where the sort of the community, expresses itself, it has you bump into everybody, right? That's clearly what happens at the farmer's market. And I think we need to look at how you can include that in the downtown core. I think we need to do that. I want to walk those blocks a little bit to see if there's not a finger of the downtown core that just comes up and captures that and just pulls it in. Once you begin to design things like that and understand these land use regulations a little bit more, and you see it on the ground in terms of those limitations we're talking about, then you can begin to understand that space a little bit differently. So I think I'm certainly going to go walk that again, and I think that makes a lot of sense to me to pull the core into encompass the park and maybe the buildings that front it.
Yeah, and
Those lots that front it.
if you shoot straight north from the west side of Farm in there,
Yeah,
up to Connie's, and
yeah, I
then
think
include back around.
Yeah.
I think that sounds like a pretty good starting.
Yeah, does that feel like what we want to call downtown for the purposes of some of these land use limitations?
On the other hand, one of the, what is the largest, one of the largest blocks primed for the type of redevelopment that we saw with the Sandpoint Financial Center where Harold's used to be? It's probably the even older Columbia Bank building
Right,
and the
yeah.
hardware store right here.
Yep.
Do we want to preclude that ever becoming an office building, for example? I mean, could a Coachella type employer come in
It
and
could happen there.
if we put it in the downtown core, it would have to be commercial on the ground floor, no office space on the ground floor.
No, that's why I think we need to go walk that block.
I mean, I also think that the parking lot and the other bank on the, I can't remember the US Bank on the corner of Second and Main, all the way over to Church was also a prime location for redevelopment.
I'd probably go the south side of Farman on the definition.
Yeah, I agree.
Well, that's city property
city
anyway,
property.
so
Yeah.
either way.
Oh, so I guess it doesn't matter.
Well, but I think for the purposes of describing what this effort is, I think it's important to include it.
The city could develop it.
That I don't think that would happen. I don't know. Again, keep in mind, the more residences we can drive in here, then you begin to see other things happen. You build in that daytime population right there. Things start to happen. I think that's going to be a real key. Is can we get some interested property owners in pursuing some multifamily development here in this outer core? I think that's when you begin to see, the next sandwich shop go in, that kind of thing.
Yeah.
So how's the commission feeling about this idea? Maybe including the Connie's, Bellwood, that block in the downtown core,
I think
but
that's right.
excluding the US Bank property
Yeah,
and putting that into the outer core along with the Coachella property.
I think that's making some sense.
Those are some blocks that there's already, like you said, the largest employer downtown, offices on the ground floor. That's an office building. If Coachella's not there in 20 years, another employer could be bringing 100 sandwich eaters downtown every day. I always think Coachella people eat across the street at Philly Joe's. I'm not sure who eats there, but I imagine some Coachella.
Not even know what half the time. It's like,
We're gonna go do a little survey. That's funny.
Field trip for everybody.
That's right.
Yeah,
So-
and I could get also talked into taking it out the third and straight up, and you just grandfather Coachella in. I think that's fine. I mean, it's still, how much opportunity did you narrow for office space? Effectively, there's one lot that you narrowed.
Right.
Yeah.
And so if that's the difference, I think it's probably a push between second and third here.
I think what we do is we draw something up and bring it back and then have the conversation. Now, keep in mind, one of the next conversations we're gonna have is about building heights.
Now, one interesting thing, Bill, is that banks and financial institutions are permitted downtown, or is this on upper floors over? What does footnote 4 say?
No drive-throughs.
Yeah. So a bank is
Still.
allowed use even in the downtown core.
Why are you looking at me, Jason?
I'm curious. Banks are treated differently than other offices. I'm saying.
In this table, they are.
Yeah. So we wouldn't be creating a nonconformity in the case of US Bank, for
Right.
example.
That's right.
Or even in terms of, what is it, Washington Federal or something north, next to, just south of,
iCards.
Right.
yeah, the one behind iCards. I
Yeah.
think it's Washington Federal or Washington Mutual.
WaFed or something like that.
Cool.
Okay, so we'll come back with another rendition of this. And I guess that leads really quickly, we didn't really talk about the southern piece going around Superior. I mean, does anything strike you is that being necessary? Are we getting tired of this? We want to move on to building heights, or save that for another conversation? I mean, there's your discretion.
Let's move on to building heights.
Okay.
I think we have some direction for,
That's some direction. We can always make some additional tweaks. I think we need to think about this. Again, I don't want to rush this. Once we get to the design standards, I think that's going to be kind of easy compared to this. This is really critical we get right.
I would just point out, actually, this is interesting. This is the first time I've seen it, but we just updated the parking exempt area that was amended last year when this body recommended amendment to Title IX, Chapter 5, our off-street parking requirements. But it's shaded in gray here. It's kind of hard to see the dark shaded area. We did extend our parking exempt zone for non-residential. Okay, keep in mind, we implemented residential parking requirements across this zone tied to square footage. But we did extend the parking exempt zone to include the Superior Gateway, as it's sometimes referred to in City Hall. I'm curious whether the commission believes that should be zoned similar to downtown outer core or downtown core.
I honestly think so. I think it's a mess down
I
there.
do too.
Same.
It's when you're coming into town, that,
Yeah.
So basically establishing that as the gateway to downtown.
Yep.
That's basically what we're saying.
and there's a lot of empty, I mean, the powerhouse in that whole area, that someday is probably going to fall down by itself. It's old enough and somebody's going to do something with it.
Keep it in mind also that what distincts the downtown core and outer core from the rest of commercial A, largely, not just building heights, but also design standards, considerably more strict design standards for the downtown core and outer core.
I guess I just argue that the ingress to the city should be a deliberate attempt to look like the
Yeah.
city.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And it's like, it's the theme. It's the,
Yeah. So
it's the brand.
let's draw this thing up with the core extending down that way and to see how that feels after we begin to understand some of the other standards. Let's do that. I think as we talk about some of those other standards, that's going to become apparent whether or not that's the right boundary or not. But we'll do that. Next up on our, and we can come back to land use, and I suspect we will. Next up are our setbacks. This is really, when you're talking about development in these districts, it's really about building to property lines. It's about filling the lot, especially in the downtown core. You don't want to have spaces. You want to have things right up at the sidewalk. That's the character. So we're just bringing that forward. I don't think there's much controversy there. I think with a residential land use in the outer core, 5 feet back from property line, can make some sense, especially given the standards we have in here for what these buildings should, have to include. There is still an allowance in the non-downtown areas to be set back a little bit further if you have this sort of civic space. I think it's kind of a cool idea. I've always enjoyed reading about that and seeing it in practice. So that's something we retain for A, B, and C.
A question here
Sure.
on the red underlined section there for setback from residential zone.
Mm-hmm.
I just wasn't following the and or scenarios for the side yard versus rear yard setback to a residential zone. I guess it seemed like it read to me that where a property abuts residential zone, you shall maintain a 10-foot side yard setback and or a 20-foot rear yard setback. So does that mean you can either choose a 10-foot setback or?
It depends on where the residential is. In some cases, you're gonna have residential behind. In some cases, you're gonna have it next door.
Okay. So
And
it's
thus
in
the and or.
direction of
That's right. If you're next, that's gonna be 10 feet. If you're in front of, it's gonna be 20 feet rear. That's what that means. Yeah. We actually have examples of that.
Okay.
I mean, all over the place. I mean, it's
I'm gonna duck out while you do building heights.
all right. Building heights.
Here, in case you need that.
Thank you. So this is where's this mouse? There it is. Okay, so we retained we retained the building height maximums and just made it clear in this table that you've got 65 feet in A, we've instituted a 45 feet in B and a 45 feet in C, and then a 45-foot downtown, which really nothing in the downtown core is that tall today, unless you measure the backside of the Canada and the church, for example, from Gunnings Alley, right? But that wouldn't be the point of where you measure. You measure the way that it's defined in the code is from the sidewalk, right? And then the outer court, 65 feet. And so what we've introduced also is this idea that there's a series of relational height limits. There are 4 of them we've created. We could create more, we could have fewer, but basically this table identifies that if you're going to be in the downtown core, you've got to adhere to 1, 2, 3, and 4. So the idea is that when you're going to exceed 45 feet, you've got to step back 10 feet, right? So no matter where you are, and this is basically in all commercial districts. If you're going to exceed 45 feet, you've got to be stepped back. So you just don't have a facade that's 65 feet tall. So that's the height. That's relational height number 1. That's just a pure if you're going to be so tall. Number 2.
Is that just a single step back? So
Yep.
at 45, you now got to step back 10.
That's right.
It's not at 35, you step back 5, 45, you step back.
Nope.
Okay.
It's just that you the portions that are going to exceed 45 feet, you're stepping back.
But that's not the downtown core,
That's everywhere.
That's the outer core and commercial area.
That it doesn't apply to the downtown core simply because the limit is 45 feet.
Right.
Yeah. Yeah, that you're absolutely right. There's probably some clarity we could bring to the table on that. So thank you for that. Number 2, relation to residentially zoned property. The max height of any structure within 50 feet of a residentially zoned lot, not a structure, a residentially zoned lot, shall be 40 feet. That's just to create some adjacency that might be a little easier on the residences. That's pure and simple. Number 3, things get a little bit more complicated with 3 and 4. So relation to existing adjacent buildings. So again, let's just put our hat on for just the downtown core zone, okay? The idea is that you can go essentially 2 stories higher than what's next to you. So if you're single story, you can go the next story. If you want to go up, you can go to 3. If you're 2, you can go to 4. But instead of writing it in terms of stories, we've written it in terms of feet, because stories downtown get interesting. Some single stories are 12 feet, some single stories are 16 feet, some single stories are 20. So we considered just putting in stories, and we changed it to a limitation that's a hard numerical limit at 35 feet when you're adjacent to a single story building, and you can't exceed 45 feet when you're adjacent to a 2-story building, knowing that 2-story building could be 18 feet or 22 feet or something like that. That's really what that standard is.
Is
Okay,
this
that's
better handled as a percentage of height to the tallest building next to it?
I think we need a slope, some kind of a formula. No, just like we do in lot coverage.
Build
That was, can we help me with the curve, please? We talked about this, and originally we had it worded as if you're single story, you can only go 2 stories next door, and that quickly became a what's a story. It's like, okay, let's just make it a hard limit. We all understand looking at something, if it's single story today, you can tell that it's single story, right? There's not an upper floor to it. Regardless of that height, you can only go to 35 feet next to it. If you're 2 stories, whatever that height is, you can only go to 45 next to it. So it's the whole idea is you can't do a super tall structure next to a single story. That's the whole point. So that's what that relational standard is.
So this would limit, so if you own what Smith, right?
Burger Dock, right?
You can't build 45.
No.
Why?
Because the argument is it looks goofy.
Yeah, but if there's infill on the other buildings, then
If there's infill, so that's why I like the relative percentage of you can't, let's say 50%. you can't exceed 50% height of the thing next to it. Right?
That's another way you could word that.
Yeah.
But yeah, there's the concept is relation to existing buildings, and the question for the commission and for you to discuss is that something you want to introduce? However, the formula is, do you want to have a relational height limit? It's common to see that in when you're trying to place infill buildings next to other things, right, that are already there, and is something that's just going to be super out of place, knowing it could be there for a long time if it's just too tall relative to what it's next to. So that's the concept. How the formula works is we could scratch the whole thing. We put it in there.
I'm just saying, like,
Yeah.
you would functionally limit everything on.
I mean, you would, we would, right?
All right, well, yeah, this rule would
Right.
functionally limit everything on the north side of Cedar from Second to the bridge, the bridge, whatever, the
Right.
Cedar Street Bridge. Everything on First, on the east side of First, all
Right.
the way to the Canada.
Right.
Everything on First from the Bridge Street to the bank.
Correct. So here's why. The other part,
That's the whole downtown core, basically.
when you, and if the city council were to adopt the historic preservation code,
Mhm.
it's going to be really hard to see those buildings change much over time. Because the whole approach to that code was to essentially lock them in amber, right? That the entire historic preservation code is a lock and amber exercise. The way it's worded doesn't mean it has to be worded that way, but that's what it really represents. It's locked in amber, and then there's a significant permit you would need to obtain in order to do that. And then even if you were to go taller on an existing historic building, there'd be rules relative to setbacks and things like that. But this is essentially very, very limiting for the geography you just described, especially things that are within that white dashed line as historic. And there's a reason for that. They're historic because there's a lot of history in specificity to how that's intended to look over time. It's intended to be enshrined and encapsulated and not change much.
I think thinking about what Will's describing here,
It's on the other side.
almost ironically, the ability to go taller would be greater on the west side of First Avenue, because most of the historic buildings on the west side of First Avenue are 2 stories.
Yeah, exactly.
When you go to the east side of First Avenue, when you're outside of the historic overlay district,
Couldn't go higher.
except for adjacent to the Canada and adjacent to Sand Creek Plaza, which are the 2 buildings that are currently taller than 1 story.
And they're
on
not
the east
historic
side.
buildings.
Canada is, it's
Well, the
also in our
Pana's
historic preservation district.
Right.
So yeah, we would be functionally limiting the majority of redevelopment along the east side of First Avenue to 35 feet, unless it were a building adjacent to an existing building taller than 1 story. And in that way, we would be incrementally allowing taller building heights. But the question is, who's going to be the first one to build a 45-foot story building or a 35
Or
foot
65
building?
right there, right?
You couldn't build a
45 is the height limit.
You'd have to build a 35 first and then buy the building next to it and build a 45 next to that, in order to,
That's right.
a lot of dominoes that you have to put in place.
But I'd argue without it though, you just have somebody go straight to 65 right in the middle of downtown.
No, because
Screw you
you
now.
can't, you have to.
45.
Well,
45.
currently, that's what you have.
Yeah.
Go to 65.
Yeah.
And so overwhelmingly, we've heard that this is a concern. So just in my travels over the last year and a half. So
Which is tall, 65 for downtown.
we'll stand next to the Seasons right there, literally on the sidewalk in front of it, look up and visualize that,
On First Avenue.
on First Avenue.
Oh, I agree with that, yeah.
Yeah. So again, we're introducing these concepts for us to fuss over to see if a relational height matters, and it's intended to avoid the stark contrast between, modest and super tall, or how can we level this out?
Observing also that 45 is extremely tall for downtown.
Yes.
Imagine standing on First Avenue right now. The parapet on the Panda is what, about 30 feet maybe? Imagine something 50% taller than the Panda right next to it right now. It would dwarf the Panda. Sand Creek Plaza might be 40 feet tall at its parapet, the 3-story office building next to Panhandle Cone Coffee. Imagine the entirety of the east side of First Avenue taller than the tallest building on First Avenue right now. That's where the relational height limit is meant to incrementally allow taller buildings over the the decades ahead of us without, in the next 5 years, we see the entirety of the east side of First Avenue at taller than any building in that zone right now.
So single story, adjacent to a single story, you get to go to
35.
35.
Mhm.
2 stories to get to go to 45.
Yep.
I mean, that's significant. And, right now they can go way higher and it hasn't been done. So
That's right. Right now you got 65
Only the
with the
reality.
provisions that are there. The last, let's throw the last relational standard
That
also.
requires structured parking currently, the 65. It's 40.
Structured parking or residential on the upper floors.
Right.
Yeah.
Yep, there's a requirement there. So the last relational standard we created, and we could create others if the commission wants us to evaluate that, a special height compatibility standards for the DC zone. So let's get the 6 centered. There we go. So within the DC zone, vertical additions to existing structures. So visualize something that's, let's say Burger Dock, shall be stepped back above and from the existing street facing parapet and shall maintain floor heights consistent with the existing structure. Vertical additions exceeding 35 feet shall be stepped back from the existing parapet 10 feet or 10% of lot width, whichever is greater. No vertical addition shall increase the apparent height or mass of building when viewed from the fronting public sidewalk. So it's intended to protect and preserve what you experience today as you're walking down the street. That's what that standard's about.
I have a question. Back to the building height, I've reminded myself of what I was told by your predecessor,
Uh-huh.
whether it's true or not, and I think I've mentioned this before. But just as a reminder to everyone, I was told that by your predecessor that she spoke to others who are informed on the subject. And one of the reasons why the standard was for 65 feet is because the foundation requirements for building on the east side of First Avenue are so great that it would not make sense for someone who wants to finally make a buck doing something to redevelop a building there that isn't tall enough to recover the cost of a foundation that you would need to put in. So I don't know if it's true. I'm just reflecting on what I was told by someone who looked right at me and sounded like she believed every word she was saying anyway. And could we bring in people who know about this thing and give us their best advice as to whether someone would ever tear down one of those buildings that are about to fall in the water anyway and put up a 35-foot building?
Okay, there's a long answer to this. Okay. I don't have the budget to hire somebody, but that doesn't mean others can't be encouraged to come and testify and share their experience. But it's going to be impossible for us to arrive at the pro forma that each individual property might have. What if it's been in the family for 100 years and there's no loan on it, and all you want to do is leave something for the community, and the basis for which you're beginning your exercise is just much different from someone who bought it for $1.5 million the day before, a neighboring property. So we just don't know the scenario that underlies how people own these properties. We don't understand what their interests are. We don't understand what their motivations are. They're all different. I spoke with 2 property owners this past week. It sort of dabbled in this conversation a little bit, and it was interesting to me that there's not a common answer that, oh yeah, no, that it's a formula. Yeah, you got to have 55 or 65 or whatever the height is. It's very much different than that. It's wanting to leave something for the community that's meaningful to them. And these are 2 individuals I spoke with that have built stuff, a lot of stuff here. The building height didn't come into the play at all. It was a conversation about leaving something that was befitting for the community, right? So that's tough. I had heard the same commentary. I think I've even talked with this commission about that, saying, hey, this is a real concern, we don't want to do something that's going to be completely limiting, but I don't know what everybody's situation is, how they differ and what their motivations are, what their abilities are, their needs to get something out of the project are. So that's number one. Number two, I did ask a reputable um, design consultant and just posed the exact same question. They said categorically, absolutely not. So I'm hearing the universe of answers on that. I've heard categorically, no, it does not have to be 65 feet to make a pencil. I've heard categorically, yes, it does. And I've also heard it really, that's not what my family is interested in doing. And I don't care if I don't want to do something that's that tall. So what do I do with that? Right. So what I'm trying to do is also keep in mind, what are other investment incentive ideas that could be thought of or, to help make something work.
One thing that we do know for a fact is that the building height has been 65 feet for about 16, 20 years now. And there's not been a
Nobody's
single
moved on it.
entitlement given or application completed for a 65-foot tall building along First Avenue. So if our goal is to incentivize redevelopment, we've had a 20-year experiment with high building heights and have seen no redevelopment along First Avenue.
Right.
I mean, the engineering is like significant.
Yeah, we understand that there's the mobilization to get the equipment out there to do the piling. I think that the soft cost engineering design is not so bad. It's just the mobilization of the equipment and driving pilings down 80 feet or 100 feet.
Yeah, right.
Right, and the number of them that you have to do. That's where the money is, right? So what are those costs? Is that millions of dollars? I've heard no. I've heard that's it's not millions of dollars. So it's a tough. Maybe one of our commissioners is experienced in construction. And can help us understand some basics as it relates to that. Just not to put anybody on the spot, but just anecdotally to help the commission arrive at some of this. Maybe
Everything would have to be pilings. I mean, when they put an addition onto what used to be the Eagles, they put an addition on the back end, and they never anticipated the pilings they were going to have to drive. For that small addition, I don't think it's about 12 by about 20 foot, but it was expensive. I mean, it ran them way out of budget. Eventually, it caused the Eagles to sell the building and move out of Dodge. So it is tough. It's all going to have to be mini pilings, mini concrete pilings, some pilings. And then once you start getting past, when you get in your outdoor experience, there's nothing you can do hardly because the land, gets thinner and thinner and thinner. And a lot of those places are built out on stakes. I mean, you go underneath those places and you're afraid it's going to fall on you. As you come back into town they made an attempt, and an attempt is the word I'd like to use, where Spuds is. They threw a retaining wall down near the water and then another secondary wall. That's fine and dandy for the loads they have right now, but somebody builds something 65 foot, they're just going to slough and go out. So it's going to be tough.
Yeah.
I'm not saying it can't be done, but it's going to be tough.
Yeah, I wish I had some real numbers and a real pro forma and someone, but I just don't. I mean, I have asked the question. Anything else you want to add to that? I mean,
I've also had the question, does the amount of foundation infrastructure required scale proportionally with the height? Or is it the same whether you're doing a 15-foot tall building as it is for a 65-foot tall building? That's the important question.
Yeah.
There's a whole lot less weight if you're talking about a single-story building compared to a 65-foot tall building. And I've had people in the building industry say, no, it's the same cost no matter what. But developers are going to make you think that because they want to maximize the return on their investment. And if they're going to put $1 million in the ground, they'd rather sell $12 million worth of real estate up on the upper floors. But that doesn't mean they might not be willing to do it if they only sell $8 million of real estate.
I mean, the bottom line, there's really not, I mean, from that perspective, there's no demand for that many units in that corridor.
Yeah.
And that's why it hasn't been done.
right.
I mean,
Another important question, I think the more important question for the commission is, do we write code and adopt policy that is most likely to lead to redevelopment if the result of that redevelopment is something the community is not willing to accept? That's probably the most important question. I mean, I think we all want to see the holes in the ground filled, but if we are worse off as a community with what they get filled with because we are repelled by 65-foot tall structures blocking our views to the mountains and the lake, that's the really important question for the commission.
But just for the record, I am not an advocate of 65-foot buildings. I just,
No, but you asked an important question that we've been asking for 4 years around here.
yeah, yeah.
Um,
And one thing that, and it's a little off the subject, but let me just ask it before I forget. Can the city, can we adopt codes that enable a reduction or an elimination of property tax in certain zones for certain purposes that are for the general welfare of the community? I know in Spokane, they've done that. I mean, there are places that you can buy and there are no property taxes for the next 20 years. Can you do that in Idaho? Can you do that in Sandpoint? Can you incentivize people to do something in a particular area that they might not otherwise do?
Well, I don't know the answer to the property tax question, but we have opportunity zone incentives to spur economic development here around capital gains taxes. That is a federal program. We have urban renewal, which is our local financial tool for incentivizing. There's plenty of precedent in Idaho for urban renewal subsidizing private development directly. The way we have used urban renewal is revitalization of our right-of-way on Cedar and First. But urban renewal dollars could be used to offset the cost of foundations for shorter than 65-foot tall buildings. So that's something that the council and the mayor and the urban renewal board decided to do.
Okay.
We only have 3 years left in our current urban renewal district. So that would likely require the establishment of a new urban renewal district with a specific objective of offsetting private development.
But that's
costs.
precisely the type of incentive that helps build momentum.
Yeah.
That's exactly what has been going through our minds as we think about this, is what could serve dollars be used for that. But I don't know if there's some kind of a tax abatement district. I don't know, Zach, if you're familiar.
I actually don't know that off the top of my head either. I will look into that because that's a good question.
Well, that would include county. I mean, because the city would
Yeah.
only be able to maybe get rid of the city portion, the rest of the county and everything.
Yeah,
it would
maybe
still
maybe
be-
it's just a city tax.
Right. That's a kind of a redevelopment agency type approach. We'd have to look into the rules on that. That's a good question.
Can you just say how high the pennant is again?
It's roughly 50 feet or so from Gunning, so that's going to be probably 35 feet-ish.
We don't really see it from First.
Yeah, for about 35 feet. If I measured it, of course, I didn't bring that with me. Let me see.
Just trying to wonder like what 45 looks like all the way along the east side of First.
I have a good example of how to find that.
I think I have it here. Well, I have Canada from Gunnings Alley is 50 feet. So you're looking at about a little over 30 feet tall. The church on First from Gunnings Alley, the east side is 45 feet. The powerhouse, for example, from the east parking lot, the east side is 55 feet at its tallest piece over there by the Verizon store, that's south, eastern corner.
Yeah.
And the granary is just about a little taller than 80 feet, which is a little farther out.
Our downtown design report, which was accepted, not adopted, accepted as a study, did some conceptual renderings showing what building heights would look like from along First Avenue, if I can find that section. I think it's towards the end. Let's go down here. So what would Church Street looking east? What would various building heights look like? This is really cool, actually. Good work by this team.
85.
Huge. It's like,
So we're gonna get an idea here of what different building height. Here's a 65-foot building at the corner of would that be church? That's is that the location? Is that First in the Bridge right now? This is looking down.
Yeah, it looks like it.
Okay. Yeah. So this is like, this would be the block that between A and P and the Grace Community Church, which is now some other church next to the hole in the ground.
the bridge.
So that's where this building would be located. 65 foot, 85 foot.
So the one on the left, is 65.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Yes. What do we have 45 or?
No. And here's
I thought of, at one point, if we could, go ask a fire truck to hang a tarp from a
Yeah,
45 feet,
this
what it
one's,
looks like.
this one's good, right? So
Yeah.
65-foot tall looking south towards the Canada, 85-foot tall looking south towards Canada. That's a looming structure.
Yeah, but we're only talking 45.
Mhm.
When we're talking about relational, we're only talking
Mhm.
45 max. That's what I was wondering.
45 max in this zone, and Canada right there is about 30-ish feet tall at its peak, so about 15 feet taller than that, so another floor on top of that, basically. So that's how we've approached building heights with these relational ideas and whatnot.
Is it planned to create graphics of these building heights? I think for even future meetings with more of the public and then the future city council meeting, a clear picture of what it would look like would be really
Yeah.
beneficial to the public.
Yeah, we could try. I mean, yeah,
Your skill to do just
Get
that.
an intern, do something like that.
I think that's a good idea. I think some people in the public hear 45 and that seems like a lot. And
it's hard to understand.
yeah, in relation to the Canada, that's taller
not
than
that
what I
weird.
expected, honestly.
Yeah.
In that view, another 15 feet or so seems reasonable, as a max.
Right.
And if something was built right next to the Canada, it would be able to be that tall, but almost nowhere else along there, well, except a couple spaces, would be able to do that.
Mm-hmm.
It's just interestingly, the design report, you see the red outlined concept. This is it's a recommended approach to addressing building heights and step backs downtown. The design report ultimately recommended a 55-foot height limit with a 20-foot setback above 35 feet. So you can kind of get an idea of what that would look like on the far right here. Let me zoom in for you.
And what we propose is a little more restrictive, just in keeping with what you see down there today.
But looking at this is what a 55-foot building height step back above 35 would look like. Yeah, useful. I mean, look at the 80. We could just go to 85 feet. What do you guys say? Good Lord.
All parking.
But that's
Oh,
that's
parking
an
garage.
8-story parking garage. That's like 3 stories of parking.
Can I ask, so if any development happens, I've noticed in the past, before First Avenue was kind of cleaned up, or maybe just after, when people were tearing apart buildings, they had to close First Avenue to get the cranes, because you can't get a crane in on Sand Creek past the Bridge Street of any size to do any work. So any of those buildings that have to be built, unless you block First Avenue, which kind of defeats the whole purpose of storefronts and office spaces and everything else, unless you close First Avenue to get them to build, I don't know how they're going to build these structures.
Be nice to close First Avenue permanently.
Yeah, maybe make it a walkway with a big crane in it.
I think you can get a crane behind like outdoor experience. There's like 12 parking spaces back there. I mean,
Not outdoor experience, but you could get behind, the couple of buildings leading up to there. There's a back parking lot
yeah.
where you can
Get
wheel
hands
a
up
crane
and
in
make
behind the
it-
Panda Theater. Yeah, you can get a crane in there.
Yeah.
But once you start going a little bit farther, you're not going to be able to get a crane in. Yeah.
Yeah, just logistically, that'd have to be really thought through in terms of traffic control plan, how you do that. This is still relatively broad strokes, covering up the downtown, trying to identify the something that's special. I think we got some good ideas tonight that we're gonna move on. Didn't hear anything about changing any of the heights or the relational standards. Believe me, you can still have your hand on the chess piece. This is not we're not voting right now. This is just kind of digesting it and understanding it.
Personally, I think the relational standards are too restrictive. I don't think 45 is too tall. I don't think 45 is too short, but I think the relational standards make it really difficult.
Are there both of them too difficult, or both 3 and 4, or let's take those.
It's coming.
Okay. So number 3 again is just you can't be too tall next to your neighbor, and number 4 is you got to be stepped back if you're going to go tall.
I think that still makes sense. Does a step back.
Number 4.
Mm-hmm.
But number 3, I think is just a little too limiting.
Yeah.
Okay.
I mean, in my
Just,
opinion,
Yep.
Observing that number 4 is for redevelopment of existing structures. So
not new ones.
no,
Correct.
correct. So this is saying that if you're going to do an addition above the existing historic structure, for example, it must be stepped back so as to not like detract from the historic nature of the existing structure.
Okay.
But let's be clear, it's not just for historic buildings, it's any building within
The
the,
existing building.
yeah, but it's sort of paired with the idea that we're also looking at, what historic preservation means as well. What number 4 is about is the experience you have today on the sidewalk versus what it would be tomorrow if you were going to do an addition to an existing building. If you're going to do a new building, you're going to go to whatever the height is. But if you're going to do an addition to an existing building, it's going to be stepped back so that experience that you have today is sort of protected because by virtue of being stepped back. That's again a point of departure. Does it make sense? Do we want to do that? Is it too limiting? What are we achieving here? All of that is. This is just trying to get the dialogue rolling with some of these tools.
This, particularly around number 3, I hear what folks are saying, particularly like along the eastern side of First. But that also applies to the outer core, right?
No, this is just DC. This is just the
Just the
DC.
inner core?
Yeah, 3 and 4 are just for the downtown.
Is there any consideration for the outer core around the adjacency and the relative height of the building next to it?
It's 65.
And you could go up to 65. So if you got a 1-story building, there's nothing in the code saying you can't go straight up to 65. in
Just
the outer
pointing
core.
out in the outer core, the step back requirement kicks in above 45 feet.
Got it.
That's right.
And another change we're making
Got it.
from the step back in our current code is that step back requirement applies to all property edges, not just the primary frontage.
Gotcha.
That's a really big change. The reason is if you have, let's say, a 60-foot wide lot, and previously the step back would have applied only to the frontage, the amount of developable space now is significantly less if you have to step it back from all property.
From all sides.
And so it will preclude some of the smaller lots from going to 65 feet.
Because it would just be a cupola stuck on top of the building.
Right, but it will enable some of the larger lots to go to, in other words, the idea here was like, do we want to prohibit another Sandpoint Financial Center? Because that's 65 foot tall, but it's on a massive lot, so it doesn't feel 65 foot tall.
Yeah.
If you squeeze the Sandpoint Financial Center down into a 60-foot lot, and you walk next to it, you'd be like, wow, that's a really tall building. But most people don't think of it as that tall because the proportion of its height to its bulk is not that great.
That's right.
So to allow a large building to go to 65 feet might make sense, whereas to allow a small building to go to 65 feet would be far more noticeable.
And
There are
it's
re-
going to be the setbacks.
Yeah, there are really few lots downtown that are going to be able to enjoy that 65 feet by virtue of the fact they're small, unless you have this tiny little hat on top of the building that's 65 feet.
Yeah. Well, what function does it serve to have like the back, like the alley facing side of the building be diminished, other than having weird looking buildings? I mean, because if it's the street facing experience, like, does the alley matter or?
Well, it's a good question. Does it matter to us that we have that? It can be worded just that the facade has to be stepped back. We maybe it doesn't make sense to do the rears. When you're talking about the look and feel of a building, the sides I think are going to matter significantly. You certainly experience that from the street. From the alley, maybe not as much. So I mean, it's not critical that the rear be stepped back. I think as a practical matter, Jason's right. There's so few lots downtown that are wide enough that you'd pursue doing this stuff over 45 feet.
How tall is that building?
65 at the peak of the.
64 and a half at the peak.
Okay.
But again, like, does it feel like a 65?
It really doesn't. I mean,
Most people are surprised here that it's as tall as it is. But if you turn around and go back, a block in the other direction, to ask, like, could a similar type of development come here? And would we want to make a rule that said they couldn't replicate what we allow one block to the north, to the west?
well, another way to look at that is, do you require a certain type of of roof design if you're going to be above a certain height. So that, for example, on the building we're just looking at, that's 75 feet tall, you know, it's got pitched roofs, it's got a mixture of roofing styles. It doesn't feel flat roof's going to, you know, you're going to see the facade wall go all the way up, right? But you don't see that with the Umpqua Bank. It's just, it's got a different kind of roof. But that gets really tough to do that kind of roof right next to another property because the snow is going to shed wear, right? So.
Or just, can you go another 10 feet taller for a mechanical area on top of the roof?
There is a provision in here that allows for, let's take a look. Where do we have that?
Features not included in building height.
Bell towers, spires, steeples, chimneys, cupolas, screened elevator and mechanical equipment enclosures. So that stuff is exempt from the height provided that it's screened. Yeah,
But basically it could look like another story up there.
could, depending on where it's located, right?
I'd like to go back to number 3 just briefly and ask my colleagues what they think, because the problem I have with number 3 as it applies to the east side of First Avenue is that depending on where that first big building is built, it dictates, you know, what is allowed elsewhere. And that, it intuitively strikes me as like that randomness is not how we should build our zoning. And so if we want I guess a smooth facade to the street and the, you know, the pedestrian experience, can we think of it, first of all, is that a concern that if they start building on the south side of this section where you're looking at now, then they can build bigger buildings all the way to the north, but if they start at the north, they can't? It seems that's, I think the way this thing is written and built, and that, I don't know, that just seems funny to me, to use a term. And I wish it was otherwise.
Commissioner, I think we need to talk about that.
Like, for example, on this screen here, is that church building a single story from this roadside? Would that be considered one story?
Is
Yeah,
that one or two?
That's a single story. That's just got a really tall parapet, right?
Mhm.
So the hole in the ground could go to 35 feet under our code as it's written. Not that,
Right.
65 feet.
Yeah, it does seem pretty restrictive. I think there's something about the incremental growth though, and just like seeing, like, as just, I think a lot of Sandpoint citizens would really have a tough time with 45-foot tall building next to a 1-story building. So there's like something there still, if we could kind of find a compromise between these two.
Well, I think we just eliminate the standard. I don't know if there's a compromise. You know, it's either you have the relational requirement or you don't. Right? I mean, that's what it is. I mean,
I think there's other scenarios though, like maybe you pull from that item 4, and so the first 10 feet can be this amount, the first 10 feet on the property, and
Maybe
then
a
you can
step
go
back
up
beyond 35 feet.
Right, you kind of maybe implement the step back scenario that we were doing in item 4, for example. That'd be a way to kind of allow them to still build 45 feet, but and acknowledge their neighbor, relate to their neighbor.
isn't that what we have in standard 1 though? Standard 1 is if you're going to do a building,
That's exceeding 45.
you can exceed 45 feet, you're to be a step back. So you're saying for an existing building,
Yeah, maybe the step back occurs just the first 10 feet relating to your neighboring building. If you're 1 story, you're 35. If you're 2 stories, you're 45.
I see you do it that way. I see so the relation kicks in to, I see what you're saying. If you're adjacent to a single story building, you can go higher. You just have to go back first and then up. That's
Right.
what you're saying.
Yeah, I mean, you
Okay.
could maybe go up to 35 and then you go back 10 feet and then you go up to 45. It's just,
That's another way to do it,
Would
right?
be taking your 4 and building in some language
Right.
that for new buildings.
Yep.
Just keep them all at 45 feet. They'll be 60 foot at the back end anyway.
Down to the creek side.
On the creek side.
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, if there's some discomfort about the idea of, someone being penalized because they went first.
Yeah.
That I understand that. These things were put in here for the express reason of trying to arrive at some reasonable set of rules and just give us a few tools to kick around. But again, it's a community issue.
But aren't we the community? We're representative of.
That's what I mean. It's a community issue, so the answer is going to arrive through this process. Is what I mean by that is you can't go to like some secret formula book and say this is the answer. It's a community thing, right?
45 feet is 3 stories, right? I mean, more or less.
For
Is it?
Not a commercial.
Not commercial.
Well, maybe. I mean, sometimes,
you could pull it off.
yeah, tight.
Yeah.
No one would want that. But
I honestly don't know how goofy a 45-foot building would look next to that church. I don't know. I don't have a sense of it.
Yeah.
that's what I was wondering if we had like a mock-up. But
It's really hard to do those mock-ups. We'll try. We'll see
But
how
I mean,
creative we
it's
can
not
get.
going to be, is it going to be a big block? And then you talked about you could address it via the form and.
Oh, we've got all kinds of standards for that, right?
blah, blah,
Keep,
blah.
keep in mind, the church has been for sale for years. The question is how goofy is a 45-foot story, 45-foot building going to look next to the 35-foot building that's already there, the Sandpoint Plaza, which is also likely to be for sale soon. And then how goofy is a 45? I mean, that entire block is up for redevelopment. So
I mean, everything from Bridge Street down.
it's just a matter
except for
of
the
time.
Canada.
Yeah. So it doesn't really matter what we put.
I mean, we're thinking in like the next 2 to 5 years when we say, well, how does this affect the hole in the ground now? But the church has been on the market for 3 years. They've got a new tenant in there now, but I mean, it's going to be bought eventually or not, depending.
Yeah,
on
and
what
I
the rules
recently
say.
heard that you can't build up to 45 along that eastern side at all. So like, why are we discussing
You
it?
can do 65.
You can do 65.
No, just the reality of being able to build a structure on the east side of First
Yeah.
cannot be done by some estimates unless it's completely onerous.
You got the money. you
Shut
do it.
down first, you can't float anything, you gotta take apart equipment, you gotta build it behind the building. Right, in terms of just literally your logistical things that are
Oh,
gonna
you can
build it.
fit, you can
So-
fit equipment in there, no problem. No, they'll find a way.
Most can make it
Yeah.
happen. Yeah.
I mean, a 45-foot tall building is being built with, I don't know if they're infringing on the right of way at all right now at Farm and Flats. I mean,
Yeah.
their crane is located on their property.
Yeah.
And they're building a 45-foot tall building with the
Yeah,
tallest crane.
they're
Sandpoint
also
I've
not
ever
gonna
seen.
slide off into
Really
the,
tall.
the river, so they have a different building requirement
Mhm.
than anybody on the east side is gonna have relative to having to drop a bunch of 80-foot pilings.
Right.
Anyway,
I'm okay with a 65, but
65.
I'm okay with 65
I think that's high.
as nobody's done it yet. And like I said, like the reality of it is so low.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Well, they thought that in Coeur d'Alene too, until
Yeah.
Hagedorn came along.
but those are like 100 or 300 or something, aren't they?
200-foot in Coeur
200,
d'Alene.
yeah. So,
It can be done.
Coeur d'Alene's working on its 4th or 5th 200-foot tall tower now. Yeah.
Well, instead of asking the number,
Yeah.
the actual max height, maybe Commissioner Weber, I think we're trying to push buildings around to achieve this height. Instead, what do we want that street facade to look like on First, for example, or Second, as it relates to the buildings? Do we want them pushed in and out? Does that matter if we have the right design standards? If you have the right height? I mean, they don't have to be pushed in and out. I get it up above 45 feet or so, pushing it in. I'm not sure if I get it after 1 story.
Yeah.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
would
It's
say
not-
that but I mean, 45 for sure. I think that makes sense.
Yeah.
I'm kind of toying with the idea. It is 35. I know it'd be more complicated
To have a
build
step
site.
back at 35,
Start
again at
the step at
45.
35.
Why don't we write that up and see what it looks like? We have relational height number 1, and then in the downtown core, we'll just make it that much more restrictive and say in the downtown core, it's that step back is going to begin at 35. Keep it that simple and see just how that reads, and let us rest with that.
I
and
mean,
does it go to 45 only? Or,
Yeah, right now it does. But unless unless this commission wants us to put in different numbers.
Yeah, Mose, talk through that real quick, because you're thinking,
Okay.
well, and maybe you can handle via step
Well-
backs, but you can allow more height, like, where's
So-
your head?
Current standard is there's step backs to get to the 65 plus other
Right.
thing. Like it has to be residential and then there has to be on-site parking.
Yeah.
Or parking in the basement is the way I understand it.
That's right.
So are those step backs enough currently to satisfy, you know, and if they start at 35 or whatever it is, I don't know what exactly it is right now. I mean, I do agree that 65 straight from the sidewalk straight up is pretty wild. Then again, I feel like how many developers are looking to make something that looks that ugly or maybe not that ugly, but that striking of being different. But then again, you know, I mean, we've all been in big cities where, you know, there's 500 feet right at the sidewalk too. So I'm not sure overall if it really matters. Like if there's demand for that in Sandpoint, then I think a lot of things have changed, you know, other than, you know, the cost and all that too. So, in that downtown area, I feel like that's probably the most appealing area to put a tall structure because of just the location. You know, if you move out of the core, then it becomes probably an office or maybe a hotel, I guess. I don't know.
But I think if you kind of, I think the way it's proposed here is you head west from the east side of First Avenue, they can get taller and taller. Am I right?
Mm-hmm.
And that enables, you know, sort of the view corridors of those western properties to be more valuable, to be more interest to developers, you know, to do something with those properties. Because if you put up a big wall here and everything else is the same height or lower, you know, the view is the mountains and the lake for crying out. I mean, you know.
Plus, it's coupled with the nature of everything else we haven't talked about tonight, which is the historic preservation piece. That's why they're kind of put on the table at the same time, and we haven't talked about that tonight, but there's additional limitations there to kind of keep that, do what the name implies, preserve it, right? So part of this is compatibility as well with that project. So you put that all in a hopper, and you can see how gets to be a little bit of a tricky one.
I mean, to me, like, design standards are more important than 10 feet of building height. I mean, like, if we don't have to look at another Quonset hut downtown or whatever, the ugly facade of Image Maker, I mean, does anybody care if that building gets erased from the earth? And
Yeah, I mean, that's the 65-foot question. I mean, that's the question before
yeah,
the commission. I mean, this is exactly the conversation we're supposed to have.
So, I think for moving the conversation along, taking a stab, getting rid of number 3, taking a stab at number 4, to include new build with a gradated step back based on height and leaving it at 45 seems like a pretty good place to
Why
start.
don't we write that up and we'll bring it back and see how it rests with people and go from there. So get rid of 3, change 4. You got that?
Can you repeat that, Grant?
Yeah, so it was in number 4, you've got a special height with a step back requirement for additional build on an existing building. Basically, you change number 4 to say that there's a required step back for new builds also. You can go up to 45, but there's a step back that has to
For new
be. And
builds.
I don't know, like, if you have an opinion whether there should be 2 step backs at different height requirements or just say, hey, at 35,
it's gonna look goofy.
just step it back. Will it look goofy? I don't
Yeah,
know.
35. I mean, that's a whole nother conversation topic, like
it?
the idea of it's kind of view shed as you're looking up. So like angling your eyeballs, you know, so like you imagine like a sloped roof, that's going to follow the slope, but you actually have quite a bit of buildable area.
Yeah.
On those upper stories still versus just one step and then you go all the way up.
Yeah, got it.
And that could offer some like, it's like the mansard roof is this kind of design where you have a sloped portion of the top of the building. It's
What
like
was
a
that
class
Mansard.
mansard.
Terrace, like,
Yeah.
Mansard versus just a flat facade with a parapet at the top. But like, yeah, in Paris, France, like it's the iconic roof line there.
Mm-hmm.
And it creates these attic spaces historically, but now it's like people are moving into this
Livable
because it's
spaces.
leftover
Okay.
originally. And I don't know, there's like some building construction details to get into there, like, okay, it was actually, you could attic truss, go over this and then slope down to the roof or to the front of the building and create a whole nother story up above. Kind of like with the Sandpoint Center building, how the gable comes up and it's less noticeable from the street, but you have that occupiable space at the top of it still. I mean, it's more complicated than just saying a step.
There's a gradated step back as you head up.
Yeah, it'd be, thinking through how that would work with our code. And you'd potentially go a little taller with it in the center of your lot because it's not impacting the street frontage as much.
Yeah.
Some codes will say, for example, at 15 feet up, 45-degree angle back. I mean, there's ways to write it. I've seen it written that way. I could explore some ideas I mean, I
But it doesn't sound like there's an elegant way.
well, zoning codes are tough, right? Because they're not design guidelines,
Yeah.
right? And so you're writing things in sort of code language and not like a standalone set of design guidelines, which is a different sort of thing. But we can, if anybody has an idea they want to run by us, great. We can take a look at what another standard might look like. I've got one in mind that I could think of that I've seen used before. That arrives at what you're talking about. It's not just necessarily a step back. It's more of an angle and you draw that angle after a certain height off the ground is when the angle begins, and then the relational height is tied to that angle, which enables what you're talking about. Taller buildings, but you're preserving a view and an openness to the corridor that you wouldn't otherwise have. So I can take a look at something like that. I think we've covered a lot tonight. What do you think about? I mean, I'll keep going if the commission wants, but we can, at our next meeting, try to wrap up the review of the code. Because next meeting would be looking at the changes we talked about, and then diving into some of the design standards, which are probably less controversial, but we need to make sure we understand them. We've put together a series of standards that are sort of used in a lot of downtowns to sort of describe how you build a downtown facade. And that would bring us to conclude on the commercial stuff in terms of at least of a review.
I'm in favor of that. Any
Yep.
commissioners have a feedback? Well, that sounds like a plan.
Sounds good.
Sounds good. I appreciate the folks from the Historic Preservation Commission coming. There was a lot on the agenda, but I just didn't think we could put one piece on the table at a time. We had to bring both. So, but next time we'll try to maybe give a primer on that as well at our next meeting.
We could maybe start with that next time, or is that out of place?
Well, I think we finished what we were doing, and then we're gonna. Historic preservation is a tough one. It's meaty. There's a lot to it. It's complicated. I think we have a separate session dedicated to that, just understanding it. And I'll be doing the same, walkthrough with the Historic Preservation Commission separately, just on the historic stuff at their next meeting. So.
We'll get to it. Yeah.
Good. Happy you didn't feel like you wasted your time here tonight. Well, we'll move on. Does staff have any final items or general matters that you'd like to bring to our attention?
No, I appreciate everybody's help tonight.
Commissioner Roundtable. Any topics of discussion we just have to get out tonight and can't wait till.
Well, I just was gonna say, Mosey, you're probably the only one sitting here besides me that remembers when the city hall left downtown. Downtown was gonna fold up. When the library left downtown, downtown's gonna fold up. High school left downtown, everything's gonna fold up. I mean, it seems like we're going through this evolution that all these big players have moved out of town that are actually attractions to the downtown core. Bring business, bring people constantly. I mean, the courthouse, when it left, I remember that was a big argument that. So, anyway, I
Yeah.
just wanted.
Yeah, good point. It's, things are changing and, the reaction can be pretty strong, but, yeah, I think it's worked out. I mean, this used to be Coldwater Creek, this building, and yeah, I think there was talk about, how much did the city spend to buy this, and it was too big or something like that. Because the old one was
Not a lot.
yeah, um, the real estate office on, yeah, Main and Second.
An interesting thought experiment, Wayne, is imagine if City Hall were still in its original location, if the library were still where McDuff's is now, if the farm and school were still where the city parking lot is now, and if the high school were still in the old ninth grade center building, what would the vitality of downtown be like with all that activity going on there?
Yeah, I don't know. I'm just bringing it
Well,
up.
I imagine it would be a magical place.
Yeah.
Imagine school children being dropped off and
Yeah.
their parents going to cafes downtown. Imagine 60 city employees working right downtown. Imagine the high school being a 2-minute walk from the Forge and the Burn Cloud. Like, it would be amazing if we had that much activity downtown. Ellie, you lived through it.
Yeah.
What was it like to go to school downtown? Yeah.
Yeah.
In a way, we're trying to restore the. Yeah.
Sure. Welcome.
I mean, it's like too small right now.
Yeah.
Not big enough.
It would.
So
Yeah.
on that
Right, right.
note, I've been here 50 years. So some of that I don't remember, like the city hall moving out. But when I was a kid, we went downtown for everything. We went downtown for pharmacy, groceries. The Safeway was over across from McDuff's. I mean, we went downtown for everything. And so when I think about how much has changed in the 50 years that I've been here, I think we can be for future thinking, what Bill said, future thinking, and bring back some of that magic, retaining that historic charm that we have. But, making our downtown a vibrant place, that's like it used to be. And I have to say, in the 90s, every other storefront was a real estate office. So that was a bit of a, that was a problem. We don't want that back. So anyway, that's all I have.
I don't think the 90s were the golden era of
No.
Sandpoint.
No.
Interestingly, in my research around parking, the farm and school was torn down 50 years ago this year.
Yeah.
Which, if you've seen pictures, I mean, it was probably the most spectacular building in Sandpoint's history.
Yeah.
And it was very tall. It was like probably 50 feet tall, right at this location of the city lot today. Now it's pavement.
Yeah, that's a good point. There was a lot of like daily type stops in town, like, yeah, Safeway was right, right down there, and J.C. Penney was on the corner of First and Cedar, and Cedar Street Bridge wasn't a thing. I don't think it was a bridge either. Well, I mean, technically it was a bridge, but yeah. So there's been a change. Like there was several pharmacies on First Avenue that so people were driving down there a lot more, and now it's just a change of the regular routine is different down there. So I think the general consensus is that downtown is difficult for locals because of parking and whatever their excuse is. But it's a different experience that I think we should kind of lean into to help it be what it's trying to be. And so I mean, whatever the people that are running businesses down there or the owners of the properties, whatever they feel like is beneficial, then I don't know if maybe we have a survey of something like that. Because it does seem like that's where I'm a little bit hesitant on the building height, because like the community says like a certain height is too tall, but when it comes down to it, I don't know if they're really that qualified to make that judgment call when they're not really the ones paying for it or developing it, or or even using those businesses that would end up there. So not to say that opinion is totally out of line, but to look at the whole big picture is what's going to pay for that if it does change. And I just find it wild to believe that somebody is gonna build anything down there like that. I just don't see how
Yeah.
it pays for itself over like 100 years. And, you know, depreciation on commercial is 39 years, which you'd be lucky to pay for something like that big. Or it's just gonna be such a big, you know, shock to the community as far as what it costs to, you know, go into a restaurant in a place like that, or to, you know, rent a location in there. It's, you've said it, Bill, it's like that we have tons of commercial space, you know, like if we needed more, everything would be full. And that's not the case right now, at least. And from my experience, there's very few times where it has been 100% occupied. So, yeah.
In a weird way, one of our objectives is to create a sense of scarcity, right?
Yeah.
You think like, well, why wouldn't we want to foster abundance and you know, make as much possible anywhere we want it? But if our goal is a vibrant downtown full of activity and vitality, the way we do that is create a sense of scarcity down there so that
But maybe a better word would be exclusivity. I mean, you know,
not like the word exclusivity in
Oh.
this town, right? It's an inclusive place where everybody feels included and welcome, but scarcity in terms of the relative the relativity of demand to supply, right? You want there to be a lot of demand and not too much supply. And I hate to bring it all back to economics, but
You always do.
it
I
always
love that about you.
will if I'm at the mic. But by squeezing that core, and that's what I heard you guys say tonight, is that, you know, maybe squeezing that downtown core a little bit more. And some really good points you're made about the value that having Coachella downtown creates, the demand that creates. What is having 100 relatively high paid tech employees in our downtown core do? It creates demand for services and goods down there that creates a sense of scarcity. And somehow Philly Joe's can survive because of Coachella. And I want Philly Joe's to be there. The alternative is another real estate office.
Yeah.
We want 10 more Philly Joe's.
Turn your microphone off. Yeah. Chair Jason is finally done speaking tonight.
Too late for this.
Well, just keep in mind that probably the two next biggest buildings and businesses going out of business is going to be the post office and the newspaper. I think you're going to see those two disappearing here in the near future, and there's going to be another big spot in town for.
We're just totally stepping in it tonight.
Well, let's
But that's because Ellie brought up the elementary school, the library, city hall. What are these? These are institutions, right? The institutions that propped up downtowns for a century have largely moved out of downtowns, and it leaves this vacuum. And the question is, what are downtowns in the era of Amazon and AI?
Yeah.
Right?
We're trying to encourage activity generators to look to downtown first. And there's a couple ways to do that. We've talked a lot about that tonight. Another one is just like Commissioner Mitchell mentioned about maybe we've got a little too much in the periphery that needs to be evaluated. So you're causing those commercial interests to look to downtown. I think that's a good place to leave it. We've got a lot kind of kicking around in our brains right now. We're going to have some more conversations into.
Sounds good.
Yeah. I would just like to thank Bill and for doing a good job.
Yeah,
I mean,
I agree.
really,
Thanks.
You're welcome. Very welcome. Happy to do it.
So thankless.
We love you, Bill.
We do.
Not Jason.
Couldn't do it without Jason. Couldn't do it without Jason and Zach. Jack gets no credit, but you have any idea how much he's involved in this? He's right there with us the whole way.
We're getting out of hand, so we're gonna adjourn at 7:53.
Thanks, boss. Thanks.
And we.